Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurun
Mantra Guru Achotoshika Gurugan Tachanane Age Goriya Vandam Vandeham Sri Guru Shijira Padakamalam Sri Guru Mastamishtam Sri Rupam Shagata Jatam Sahaganaganatam Vitam Shijivan Sadvaitam Savatatam Parijnashaitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shibishakam Kitanishcha Vanchaka Patruvishcha Kripshasinda Bevachabditnam Pavane Vaishnava Namaha Oma Gyana Timanandasya Gyana Jana Shalakaya Chukshush Umanitam Nina Tashma Shri Guruve Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Buddha Rahmana Bhaktivedanta Swami Jinamani Namaste Shashwari Divamudamana Vishani Vishesha Shanwari Kashta Deshtai. Welcome to lesson 2 of our study of the Nectar of Devotion. In lesson 1 we explained the term Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and how Prabhupada derived the title Nectar of Devotion. We discussed the significance of the 6 Goswamis and specifically Srila Rupa Goswami, the author of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which was considered to be his most important writing. We identified Prabhupada's purposes in writing the Nectar of Devotion, and we discussed the relevance of these for our own practice of Krishna consciousness. We explained the objective of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Vrindavan Krishna, Akila Rasamrita Murti, the embodiment of all rasa. We presented an overview of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the 4 divisions of the watery ocean, and particularly the Purva Vibhag, the eastern division, which we'll be studying in our course for the Bhakti Shastri. So we're carrying on. In this lesson we will complete the introduction that Srila Prabhupada has written, and we are continuing on the top of page 21, Roman numerals, where Srila Prabhupada begins to explain the definition of pure devotional service as he describes the authorized description of bhakti or devotional service. And he begins to explain and translate, paraphrase and explain the verse defining pure devotional service as given by Srila Rupa Goswami in text 11 of the first verse of in text 11 of the first chapter of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Rupa Goswami writes this verse, which Srila Prabhupada is beginning to comment on, and let's examine this verse from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karamadhyana britam anukulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktir uttama. Prabhupada translates, when first-class devotional service develops, one must be devoid of all material desires, knowledge obtained from monistic philosophy and fruitive action. The devotee must constantly serve Krishna favorably as Krishna desires. So we will examine this verse from the point of view, firstly, of the Swarup Lakhan, the essential characteristics, and then from the Tatastha Lakhan, the marginal characteristics. So, the essential characteristics of the verse are the second half of the verse, Anukulena Krishna Anushilanam, which actually define in detail, they define specifically what is devotional service. And the first half of the verse, Anyabhilashita Shunya Jnana Karmadi Anabritam, they're describing the marginal symptoms of pure devotional service, which we will also examine. So let's begin by looking at the essential symptoms, characteristics, definition of pure devotional service, word by word. Anukulyena, the word actually means favorable, which means that the activity of serving Krishna, it should be pleasing to Krishna, and it should also be performed with an intention to please Krishna. So in this connection, Srila Prabhupada gives the example of Kamsa, that although he was constantly remembering Krishna, which is an item of devotional service, that's called Vishnu Smarana. And by practicing that, so if you remember Lord Vishnu, that's serving Lord Vishnu, that's Krishna Bhakti, that's Vishnu Smaranam. And if you do Krishna Bhakti, that's pleasing to Krishna. So therefore, remembering Krishna is pleasing to Krishna. So is Kamsa's constant remembrance of Krishna, as he was worried about the omen, and then he would see holes in his reflection, and he couldn't sleep, and he was constantly thinking of Krishna. So he was in complete Krishna consciousness. So was Kamsa performing pure devotional service? Well, here Rupa Goswami explains that he wasn't. Actually, Mahaprabhu also gives the example of Kamsa in this discussion, pure devotional service. And in this case, it wasn't performed with the intention to please Krishna. Actually, Kamsa's intention was to kill Krishna. So even though he was constantly remembering Krishna, we can't consider Kamsa a pure devotee, and we can't consider that Kamsa is practicing pure devotional service. We can't consider him a pure devotee, although he's remembering Krishna and in that way doing devotional service. So first component of our pure devotional service is that it should actually be pleasing Krishna, and it should be performed with the intention to please Krishna. Another example comes to mind was when Shachinandan wandered in the marketplace as he was just a young toddler. One time he was spotted by two thieves whose intention actually was to rob Sachinandan for seeing the beautiful jewels and ankle bells and earrings, etc. So they approached him, and publicly they made the comment that, "Oh, darling, where have you been? Here, come here. We'll take you home now." Just so that publicly they looked like they were doing the right thing. When they picked up Sachinandan and put him on their shoulders, and then they headed off. And Sachinandan, he was quite enjoying actually riding on the shoulders of those thieves. As they were heading for their hideout, they were discussing, "No, I'll take the ankle bells, no, I'll take the earrings." And actually, one of them was handing sweetmeats. He was handing the sweet, and Nimai was sitting on the shoulders, going on the ride and eating the sweetmeats. So he was actually enjoying that. But their intention was not to serve, so we can't consider them performing pure devotional service. However, we never really can know with these Leela type situations. Perhaps they're eternal associates of the Lord who always performing that Leela in that way, serving Him, because it was very pleasurable for Jagadant Mishra and Sachinandan when they couldn't find Nimai, and all of a sudden he was put down by that. So in that way it was a joyful moment, and though they're serving Sri Hari in that way. So in any case, our devotional service, we should specifically have the intention to please Krishna, and it should be pleasing to Krishna. That's called anukul. In regarding Krishna, Prabhupada explains that generally that Krishna includes all his expansions as well as his pure devotees. Although Krishna means everything, when we say Krishna, because there's nothing beyond Krishna, Krishna is Advaita, there is nothing else besides Krishna. So serving Krishna, we could say that, well, let me serve the ground, let me serve the marble, let me serve that this is Krishna. So therefore, Prabhupada says, generally, however, we understand Krishna to mean Krishna and his personal expansions. Krishna is personal expansions. And that includes Krishna and all expansions of Krishna, Vishnu Tattva, as well as pure devotees. Pure devotees. And so many, we worship so many devotees. We worship Acharyas, we worship Ma Ganga, we worship Tulsi Rani, we worship Mahadev as pure devotees. So in this way, all of these things can be included in our practice of pure devotional service, worshipping Vaishnavas and worshipping Krishna and all forms of Lord Vishnu. Anushilanam, Prabhupada's translating the words Anushilanam, anu meaning to follow, and continuously. And Srilanam Prabhupada comments as cultivation and behavior. Prabhupada comments, the particular word used by Srila Rupa Goswami in this connection is anushilanam, or cultivation, by following the predecessor acharyas. As soon as we say cultivation, we must refer to activity. Without activity, consciousness alone cannot help us. So, anukulena Krishna anushilanam bhaktir uttam, Prabhupada translates that second half of the verse, which is actually the essential characteristic features of pure devotional service, on the page 24 of his introduction. That's about 3/4 of the way to the top of the page. Prabhupada says, the definition of a pure devotee, as given by Srila Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, can be summarized thus. His service is favorable and is always in relation to Krishna. So in relation to Krishna means to Krishna and his personal expansions and pure devotees. And it's always means that it's cultivation, one's activities, one's constantly performing. And it's favorable means it actually is pleasing Krishna and it has the intention to please Krishna. And these are the essential components of pure devotional service. Let's take a look now at the tatastha lakshana, the marginal symptoms defining pure devotional service. Anya abhilashita shunya. So anna means other. Abhilash, desires. Shunya should be zero. Prabhupada translates as devoid of all material desires. Anya abhilashita shunya. For example, jnana karmadi anabritam. Jnana means desire for liberation. Karma means fruitive activity. Means remuneration in this life or in awarding the abodes of the heavenly planets, etc. Artificial detachment and mystic yoga. Anabritam, so not covered by. Prabhupada defines the meaning of anabritam. Uncovered by mental speculation or fruitive activities. Karma kanda, jnana kanda, karma kanda, jnana karmadi anabritam, not covered. Jnana karmadi anabritam, not covered. If you mix up karma with bhakti, if you mix up jnana with bhakti, or if you mix up yoga, it's contaminated, it's not pure. Pure devotional service is given by Rupa Goswami, anyabhilashita shunya, no desire for fruitive activity, or philosophical speculation, or yoga, mystic yoga, magic. No, simply how to satisfy Krishna, that is bhakti. Anukulena means it is favorable, what Krishna desires. There it is. Very nicely, Prabhupada, in 2 sentences, he defines devotional service extremely fundamentally in line with Rupa Goswami's definition. No desire for fruitive activities or philosophical speculation or yogic, mystic, yogic magic. No, simply to satisfy Krishna, that is bhakti. Anukulena means what is favorable, what Krishna desires. So in this way we've discussed the uttam bhakti, the first-class devotional service, or pure devotional service, Shuddha Bhakti, Uttam Bhakti, Ananda Bhakti. In different places it's referred to differently. The principal characteristics are that it's favorable for Krishna and it's constantly performed and it's performed with the intention to please Krishna. And the secondary characteristics are that it is completely devoid of the mix of desires for liberation or for material remuneration, etc. This is pure devotional service. Prabhupada, towards the conclusion of his introduction, further gives us some tips, some understanding what is the definition of pure devotional service. Actually, Krishna consciousness can be based simply on hearing, chanting, remembering, etc., described in Srimad Bhagavatam and 9 different processes, besides which everything done is unfavorable to Krishna consciousness. Thus one should always be guarding against fall downs. So as Prabhupada said, simply based upon hearing and chanting. So we can merge ourselves in the practice of pure devotional service simply by practicing these activities of devotional service, as Prabhupada is referring to here: hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, and simply practicing these activities with the intention of pleasing Krishna and not with the intention of enjoying the result myself. This is the practice of pure devotional service. It's a very simple thing. And Prabhupada has clarified in very clear terms, fundamental terms, what is the definition of pure devotional service. As we progress in our study of the Nectar Devotion, we'll understand what level of practice we are on. We are on the practice of sadhana, Vaidhi sadhana, bhakti, which means we're practicing pure devotional service. At this stage, we haven't come to the stage of bhava and prema and actually matured, or the siddha. We're at the level of the sadhana. And the sadhana practices, if properly applied, are guaranteed to bring the practitioner to the level of siddha, which is bhava and prema. So we're practicing pure devotional service as Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, or uttam bhakti, pure devotional service at the sadhana level. And it's a very simple thing. We perform these activities of hearing and chanting, remembering Krishna, the Navavidha bhakti, and the three principal activities are very important for the neophytes: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. And we perform these activities simply for pleasing Sri Hari. And in that way, our practice, this is the essential practice of sadhana bhakti. And the subsequent chapters of the Nectar Devotion will further elaborate quite a lot. We have 14 chapters on the practice of sadhana, on the Choishati Sharananga, the 64 items of sadhana bhakti. And we'll be discussing those in the subsequent lessons. So let's conclude our discussion on the definition of pure devotional service as given in Srila Prabhupada's introduction to the Nectar Devotion with this comment from Prabhupada's preface. It's only for our guidance that Srila Rupa Goswami prepared his book Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is now presented in the form of the Nectar Devotion. Person engaged in Krishna consciousness movement may take advantage of this great literature and be very solidly situated in Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.